The city had fallen silent, save for the distant wails of the infected, a sickening symphony of anguish and inhuman hunger. Jack gripped the steering wheel of his battered Jeep, knuckles white, as he navigated the debris-strewn streets. His eyes darted frantically, searching for any sign of life or undeath. Suddenly, a blur of movement in the rearview mirror. Jack slammed on the brakes, tires screeching, as a horde of zombies burst from the shadows, their once human forms contorted by the ravaging virus. But these were no ordinary undead. Their movements were almost unnaturally fluid, their eyes burning with a primal intelligence. Shit, Jack cursed, shifting the Jeep into reverse, but the creatures were too fast. One leaped onto the hood, its jaws snapping mere inches from his face. Jack frantically swung the crowbar he had grabbed earlier, battering the zombie's skull until it crumpled, black ichor spattering across the windshield. He gunned the engine, the Jeep lurching backward, but more of the nightmarish creatures were closing in, their eerie howls echoing through the desolate streets. Jack's heart raced as he desperately searched for an escape route, but the city had become a maze of destruction, the roads blocked by abandoned cars and debris. Suddenly, a flicker of movement in the corner of his eye. The lone figure sprinting down a side street, pursued by a pack of the mutated zombies. Without hesitation, Jack swung the Jeep around and plowed towards the stranger, praying he could reach them in time. The figure, a young woman by the look of it, spotted the Jeep and ran towards it, her face a mask of terror. Jack leaned over and flung open the passenger door. "Get in," he yelled, and the woman dove inside, slamming the door behind her just as the zombies converged. "Drive," she screamed, and Jack floored the accelerator, the Jeep lurching forward. He glanced in the rearview mirror, his stomach twisting at the sight of the zombies, their mouths agape, their clawed hands clawing at the rear of the vehicle. "What the hell is happening?" Jack demanded, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. The woman, her breath ragged, turned to him, her eyes wild. "They're not like the others," she gasped. "Faster, stronger, more _intelligent _. They're evolving, adapting. And they're _hunting us." Jack's mind raced, struggling to process the implications of her words. Evolved zombies, hunting their prey with a cunning and ferocity he had never seen before. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white, as he pushed the Jeep to its limits, desperate to put as much distance between them and the nightmarish creatures behind. But as they tore through the shattered cityscape, Jack knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was no longer a fight for survival. It was a battle for the very soul of humanity. A battle against a terrifying new breed of zombies, faster, smarter, and deadlier than anything they had ever faced before. And the stakes had never been higher. The Jeep careened through the deserted streets, its engine roaring as Jack pushed it to its limits. In the passenger seat, the young woman clutched the door handle, her knuckles white with tension. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice laced with fear. "I don't know," Jack admitted, his eyes scanning the devastated landscape for any sign of refuge. "I was just trying to get away from those _things _." The woman shuddered. "They're not like the others," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're different. _evolved _." Jack glanced at her, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean, evolved?" he asked. "I saw them," she said, her eyes haunted. "They're faster, stronger, more _intelligent _. They seem to be working together, hunting in packs. And they're _changing mutating, becoming something _else _." Jack's heart sank as the full weight of her words sank in. If these zombies were truly evolving, becoming more than mindless, shambling creatures, then their chances of survival had just plummeted. Suddenly, a flash of movement in the rearview mirror caught his eye. The horde was still in pursuit, their unearthly howls echoing through the deserted streets. "Hang on." Jack yelled, swerving the Jeep around a pile of rubble. The vehicle careened wildly, the tires screeching, but he managed to keep it under control. "We need to find a safe place to hole up," the woman said, her voice trembling. "Somewhere we can barricade ourselves in and wait this out." Jack nodded, his mind racing as he scanned the devastated cityscape for any sign of a secure location. But everywhere he looked, he saw only the crumbling ruins of a once vibrant metropolis, now reduced to a nightmarish playground for the evolved zombies. As the Jeep hurtled through the streets, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted. The zombies seemed to anticipate their every move, their inhuman howls echoing ever closer. And then, in the distance, he saw it. A massive, heavily fortified structure, its walls still standing amidst the chaos. A glimmer of hope flickered in Jack's heart. "There," he shouted, pointing towards the building. "That might be our best chance." The woman followed his gaze, her eyes widening. "Let's hope it's not too late," she said, her voice taut with apprehension. As the Jeep raced towards the fortified structure, Jack could feel the horde closing in, their hunger-fueled shrieks piercing the air. The race for survival had just begun, and the stakes had never been higher. The Jeep careened through the deserted streets, its engine straining as Jack pushed it to its limits. In the passenger seat, the young woman clutched the door handle, her knuckles white with tension. "There," Jack shouted, pointing towards a massive, heavily fortified structure in the distance. "That might be our best chance." The woman's eyes widened as she took in the sight of the looming building. "Let's hope it's not too late," she said, her voice taut with apprehension. As the Jeep drew closer, Jack could see that the structure was a former military base, its towering walls and reinforced gates still standing amidst the chaos of the city. A glimmer of hope flickered in his heart. If anyone had the resources and defenses to withstand the onslaught of the evolved zombies, it would be the military. But as they neared the gates, Jack's optimism began to fade. The once imposing structure was now a scene of utter devastation, with crumbling walls and the charred remains of vehicles scattered across the courtyard. "Oh God," the woman whispered, her eyes wide with horror. "What happened here?" Jack swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "I don't know," he said, his voice grim. "But we have to find out. We need to get inside, _now_. Gunning the engine, Jack steered the Jeep towards the battered gates, praying they would find a way in. As they approached, a movement in the shadows caught his eye. A figure, clad in tattered military fatigues, emerged from the rubble, its movements erratic and unnaturally fluid. "Zombie," the woman screamed, and Jack swerved the Jeep, narrowly avoiding a collision. But more of the creatures were emerging from the wreckage, their glowing eyes fixed on the vehicle. "Hold on," Jack yelled, slamming his foot on the accelerator. The Jeep lurched forward, smashing through the gates and scattering the zombies in its wake. Jack drove recklessly, weaving through the debris-strewn courtyard, searching for a way inside the fortified structure. Suddenly, a massive steel door came into view, partially open. Without hesitation, Jack steered the Jeep towards it, praying they would find sanctuary within. As the Jeep careened through the opening, Jack could see the zombies closing in, their unearthly howls echoing through the courtyard. Gritting his teeth, he pressed the accelerator to the floor, the Jeep barely making it through the narrowing gap before the door slammed shut behind them, sealing them inside. For a moment, there was silence, an eerie, unsettling calm. Jack and the woman sat in the Jeep, their hearts pounding, as they surveyed the devastation that lay before them. This military base, once a symbol of strength and security, had been reduced to a graveyard, a twisted, nightmarish refuge from the horrors that now stalked the streets. And as they stepped out of the Jeep, Jack knew that their fight for survival had only just begun. Jack and the young woman stepped out of the Jeep, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence that had settled over the decimated military base. The once imposing structure was now a scene of utter devastation, its walls crumbling and the charred remains of vehicles scattered across the courtyard. "What the hell happened here?" the woman whispered, her voice laced with a mixture of fear and horror. Jack shook his head, his brow furrowed. "I don't know, but we need to find out," he said, his gaze scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Cautiously, they made their way through the courtyard, weaving between the debris and the husks of burned-out military vehicles. The air was thick with the stench of charred flesh and the acrid scent of smoke, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of shifting rubble. As they approached the main entrance to the base, Jack paused, his senses on high alert. "Wait," he murmured, raising a hand. "Do you hear that?" The woman strained to listen, her eyes darting back and forth. At first, there was nothing, just the eerie silence. But then, a faint, guttural sound began to echo through the courtyard, growing steadily louder. Jack's heart raced as he recognized the haunting, inhuman wail, the unmistakable cry of the evolved zombies. "We need to find cover, _now_," he hissed, grabbing the woman's arm and pulling her towards a nearby building. They ducked behind the crumbling walls, crouching low as the sound of the zombies' approach grew louder and more menacing. Peering cautiously around the corner, Jack's eyes widened in horror at the sight that greeted him. A pack of the nightmarish creatures was converging on the courtyard, their movements fluid and coordinated, their pale, distorted faces twisted into expressions of primal hunger. But what was truly terrifying was the way they seemed to communicate with one another. Their guttural cries and jerky gestures almost intelligent. It was as if they were strategizing working together to hunt down their prey. Jack felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the full extent of the threat they were facing. These were no longer mindless, shambling hordes. These were predators evolving and adapting, becoming an even more formidable enemy. Gripping the crowbar he had grabbed earlier, Jack steeled himself for the inevitable confrontation. He knew that their only chance of survival was to find a way to outwit these evolved zombies, to stay one step ahead of their relentless pursuit. But as the creatures drew nearer, Jack couldn't help but wonder, was there any hope of defeating an enemy that was growing smarter, faster, and more deadly with each passing moment? Jack and the young woman crouched behind the crumbling walls of the decimated military base, their hearts pounding as the pack of evolved zombies drew closer. The creatures moved with a fluid, coordinated grace that sent chills down Jack's spine. It was as if they were hunting, their pale, distorted faces twisted into expressions of primal hunger. Gripping the crowbar he had grabbed earlier, Jack peered cautiously around the corner, his eyes narrowing as he studied the creatures' movements. They seemed to communicate with one another, their guttural cries and jerky gestures almost intelligent, as if they were strategizing, working together to track down their prey. The woman beside him trembled, her knuckles white as she clutched a makeshift weapon she had found amidst the debris. "What do we do?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jack's mind raced, desperately searching for a way to outwit these evolved zombies, to stay one step ahead of their relentless pursuit. "We need to find a way to lure them away from the main entrance," he murmured, his gaze scanning the courtyard for any potential distractions. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught his eye. A figure, clad in tattered military fatigues, stumbled out from behind a scorched vehicle. The zombies instantly turned their attention towards the new target, their unearthly howls echoing through the courtyard as they converged on the unfortunate soul. "Now," Jack hissed, grabbing the woman's arm and pulling her towards the entrance. They sprinted across the open space, their footsteps muffled by the cacophony of the zombies' feeding frenzy. As they reached the massive steel door, Jack frantically searched for a way to secure it. "Help me," he shouted, pushing against the heavy barrier, straining to close it before the zombies could follow. The woman joined him, her muscles straining as they fought to seal the entrance. Inch by agonizing inch, the door began to swing shut, the groaning of the hinges drowned out by the frenzied cries of the evolved zombies. Just as the gap was closing, a pale, clawed hand suddenly shot through the narrowing space, grasping at them with inhuman desperation. Jack swung the crowbar with all his might, shattering the creature's wrist and causing it to recoil with a piercing shriek. With one final heave, the door slammed shut, the echoes of the zombies' wails fading into an eerie silence. Jack and the woman stood, panting, their hearts racing, as they surveyed the relative safety of the fortified structure. But even as they caught their breath, a sense of dread crept into Jack's mind. They had managed to escape the immediate threat, but he knew that the evolved zombies were out there, growing stronger, smarter, and more deadly with each passing moment. The battle for survival had only just begun. Jack and the young woman stood in the relative safety of the fortified military base, their hearts pounding as the sounds of the evolved zombies' unearthly wails faded into the distance. The massive steel door they had just slammed shut was the only barrier between them and the nightmarish creatures prowling the decimated courtyard. Catching their breath, they took a moment to survey their new surroundings. The once imposing structure was now a scene of utter devastation, with crumbling walls, charred vehicles, and the remains of fallen soldiers scattered throughout the eerily silent halls. "We need to find a way to secure this place," Jack said, his voice low and tense. "Those things aren't going to give up easily." The woman nodded, her brow furrowed with concern. "Where do we even start?" she asked, her gaze sweeping across the dismal landscape. "This place is a mess, and who knows what else is lurking in the shadows." Jack's mind raced as he considered their options. "Let's split up and search for supplies, weapons, anything that can help us fortify this place," he said, his tone grave. "But stay alert. We don't know what else might be waiting for us in here." Gripping their makeshift weapons, the pair cautiously made their way through the winding corridors of the military base, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. In the dim, flickering light, they could see the evidence of a desperate, last-ditch defense: spent shell casings, overturned furniture, and the occasional splash of dried blood. As they explored the various rooms and hallways, Jack and the woman began to piece together the grim story of what had happened here. It was clear that the military had been overwhelmed, their defenses crumbling in the face of the evolved zombies' relentless onslaught. "They never stood a chance," the woman murmured, her voice tinged with a mix of sorrow and fear. "If these things are as smart and strong as you said, how are we supposed to survive?" Jack's jaw tightened, his grip on the crowbar tightening. "We have to try," he said, his voice resolute. "We can't just give up. There has to be a way to hold them off, or at least find a way out of this hell." Rounding a corner, they stumbled upon a well-stocked armory, the racks of weapons and ammunition a welcome sight. Quickly, they began to gather what they could, loading up on anything that might give them an edge against the evolved zombies. As they made their way back towards the main entrance, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed to shift, the silence growing heavier with each step. And then, a sudden movement. A pale, distorted face emerging from the darkness, its glowing eyes fixed on them with an unsettling intelligence. "They're here," Jack breathed, his heart racing as he braced himself for the impending onslaught. The battle for survival was about to reach a fever pitch. Jack and the young woman whirled around, their weapons at the ready, as the pale, distorted face of an evolved zombie emerged from the shadows. The creature's glowing eyes fixed on them with an unsettling intelligence, and Jack could feel his heart racing as he braced himself for the impending onslaught. But the zombie did not attack immediately. Instead, it let out a low, guttural growl, its head tilting slightly as it studied them. Then, to their horror, more of the nightmarish creatures began to appear, slowly surrounding them, their movements fluid and coordinated. "They're toying with us," the woman whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Jack's grip tightened on the crowbar, his knuckles turning white. "Stay close to me," he murmured, his eyes darting between the encroaching zombies, searching for an escape route. The creatures seemed to sense their prey's desperation, and their guttural cries grew louder, almost taunting. Jack could feel the weight of their collective gaze, the hunger in their pale, distorted faces palpable. Suddenly, one of the zombies lunged forward, its jaws snapping mere inches from the woman's face. She let out a terrified scream, swinging her makeshift weapon with all her might, and the creature recoiled with a piercing shriek. The action seemed to trigger a frenzy among the other zombies, and they surged forward, their movements a blur of coordination and speed. Jack and the woman found themselves backed against the wall, fighting for their lives as the creatures closed in, their clawed hands grasping and tearing. But just as all hope seemed lost, a deafening explosion rocked the corridor, sending debris and shrapnel flying in all directions. Jack and the woman ducked, covering their heads as the zombies were thrown back by the shockwave. Seizing the opportunity, they sprinted down the corridor, their hearts pounding as they sought to put as much distance between themselves and the evolved creatures as possible. They rounded a corner, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous halls, and suddenly found themselves face to face with a group of heavily armed soldiers. "What the?" one of the soldiers began, but Jack cut him off, his voice urgent. "We need to get out of here, _now_, he gasped. "There are _things out there, things you've never seen before. They're not like the others. They're _evolving_. The soldiers exchanged a glance, their expressions grim, and Jack knew that they had witnessed the horror firsthand. Without a word, they motioned for the pair to follow, and the group set off, racing through the winding corridors of the military base, the echoes of the zombies' unearthly wails fading in the distance. As they ran, Jack couldn't help but wonder, were they truly safe, or had they merely found a momentary respite from the nightmarish creatures that now prowled the decimated halls? The battle for survival had reached a new and terrifying level, and he knew that the stakes had never been higher. Jack and the young woman raced through the winding corridors of the military base, their lungs burning as they struggled to keep up with the heavily armed soldiers leading the way. The echoes of the evolved zombies' unearthly wails still lingered in the cavernous halls, a chilling reminder of the horrors they had narrowly escaped. As they rounded a corner, the soldiers abruptly halted, raising their weapons in a defensive stance. Jack and the woman tensed, their hearts pounding, but the soldiers held their ground, their gazes fixed on the shadows ahead. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, a man in tattered military fatigues, his eyes wild and his movements erratic. "Hold your fire," he shouted, his voice ragged. "It's me, Sergeant Miller." The soldiers visibly relaxed, lowering their weapons, and Jack felt a surge of relief. Perhaps they had found an ally in this nightmare of a place. Sergeant Miller approached them, his expression grim. "You two need to come with me," he said, his tone urgent. "We've got a situation that's about to get a whole lot worse." Without hesitation, the group followed the sergeant, weaving through the battered corridors until they reached a fortified command center. The room was a hive of activity, with soldiers scrambling to monitor various screens and communication systems. "What's happening?" Jack asked, his voice tense. Sergeant Miller turned to face them, his face etched with worry. "Those _things you encountered out there, they're not just evolving, they're adapting at an alarming rate," he said, his hands clenching into fists. "We've been tracking their movements, and they seem to be converging on this base, coordinating their attacks like a hive mind." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. How was that possible? He breathed, his mind racing with the implications. "We're not sure," the sergeant admitted, "but what we do know is that they're becoming more intelligent, more _dangerous_ with every passing moment. And they're not just mindless, shambling creatures anymore. They're _hunters_, planning their next moves, anticipating our defenses." The young woman beside Jack shuddered, her face pale. "So what do we do?" she asked, her voice small. Sergeant Miller's expression hardened. "We fight," he said, his voice resolute. We've been preparing for this, fortifying the base, stockpiling weapons and supplies. But we're running out of time. Those _things are closing in, and we need to be ready. Jack felt a surge of determination. Then let's do it, he said, his grip tightening on the crowbar. We're not going down without a fight. As the group moved to their positions, Jack and the woman exchanged a glance, their eyes reflecting the same unspoken fear, that they were about to face a battle for the very survival of humanity, against a new breed of zombies that were faster, smarter, and deadlier than anything they had ever encountered before. The final showdown was about to begin.